The Renaissance, Sir Francis Bacon. Part 9, Idols of the Cave, Professor Michael Botwin, Department of Psychology, California State University Press. Bacon had 4 idols, which had to do with making errors in judgments. The first idol is the idols of the cave. And these are personal biases that we may have and bring into our research. They may be based on intellect, they may be based on your experience, your education, or just your feelings and emotions about an issue. Now, this label of the cave goes back to the allegory of the cave and Plato. So we have to keep that in mind as we go forward. And what Bacon said was that individuals have biases to the type of information they attend to. Many of these biases may be based on tradition, and we might find some people who favor antiquity, others who favor novelty, some who favor parts to the exclusion of the whole, others who favor the whole to the exclusion of the parts. And some individuals favor ideas that support previous conclusions. So you can see that all of these are potential sources of error in our experiments. And personally, I believe the idols of the cave is still something that researchers have to watch out for to this day. Bacon says these tendencies towards intellectual error derive from our individuality. There are several subcategories: ancillarity, the tendency to overemphasize the area of knowledge or the subject that one is familiar with. So if you see everything from your pet paradigm, you may be missing important information about how something works. For example, being an evolutionary psychologist, if I only look at evolutionary solutions for things, I'll miss a lot of potential issues when I set up a study. We also have conservatism. This is the tendency to admire and prefer the past over the present. There are some people who are always looking at the good old days, right? Here is a movie that really represents that. It's actually one of my favorite movies. It's a Woody Allen movie, Midnight in Paris, with Owen Wilson as the lead character. He's a kind of frustrated writer and longs to have lived in the 1920s in Paris with Hemingway and T.S. Eliot and all of the other famous 1920s writers and arts people. In the end, he finds out better to live in the time that you belong in. But some people are always admiring the past. The opposite of that is novelty. Some people prefer an idea just because it's new, and they just like new ideas, whether the old idea still has value or not. And you can make some severe problems for yourself by just accepting new, novel, untested ideas. Another one of the areas to look at in terms of the idol of the cave is authority. And this is the tendency to accept authoritative propositions without critically evaluating them. In other words, believing everything that an authority figure tells you. So, I really want you to believe this one, because I told you so. Well, when you look at things like authority, you have to look at who's making the statement, what their authority is based on. Oftentimes, students uncritically accept anything that someone on the other side of the podium tells them. And ancient times, which I guess gets back to the old antiquity, when I taught intro psych, I had what I called a BS lecture. And I literally just made up a whole bunch of nonsense on the fly. And I wanted to see how long I could fool people, how long I could pull the wool over their eyes. And once I went 50 minutes, and students took 10 or 12 pages of notes. And then when I finally got so outlandish that someone caught on, many of the students were really angry because they wasted the time and energy to take notes, but others saw what they really were supposed to see. Just because an authority figure tells you something, you shouldn't accept it as truth. But we tend to bow to authorities. This is classic in psychology. It goes back to things like the Stanley Milgram problem. And remember Milgram's classic studies in obedience to authority. And he found, to his surprise, people generally will do what they're told. Our last point in our discussion of the idols of the cave is inertia. And this is the tendency to bypass intellectually difficult problems. What Bacon says is sometimes a problem is just so complex, people don't even try or attempt to solve it just because it's hard. If one looks at all the world problems we have today, and I'm not going to give you a list, we don't have that much time, many of them are extremely complex things. Let's just take global warming, for example. Very difficult problem, but one we must solve, or future generations aren't going to have very good quality of life on this little rock that we live on. So, hopefully, this first idol wasn't too hard to get through. 3 to go. We'll see you next time on the history of psychology. Bye now. This has been a We Have Couches video production. Copyright 2020. Professor Michael Botwin. All rights reserved.